So welcome to Unleashed Learning TV. It's the place that helps you boost student engagement and unlock consistent and effective teaching. Now, if you or your learning community are committed to ensuring learning sticks for everyone, I promise you, this is the interview for you. Now, Nasreen El Shweifeti is here, and she's a consultant and trainer working with diversity kids who work to ensure that all students from all backgrounds are included, feel safe, can participate, and can make sure that everyone thrives. I can't wait to get started. So, Nasreen, thank you for being here. We were talking earlier that, inclusion is a big part of what we do at Unleashed Learning to get learning to stick. And you're out there working with educators to support that. So I wanted to interview you. And I'd really like to ask, how do you define or think about inclusion in our field of education? I know you work in early childhood, but it connects to all the work that we do as well. So how do you define it or think about it?
So it's, lots of people talk about it and everyone would have their own definition. But one thing I always think about is if I'm going to observe successful inclusion, I would see a group of diverse individuals coming together for a common goal, but being able to contribute meaningfully and participate in their own way. Now, the thing about inclusion is sometimes we choose where we want to belong, and sometimes that's actually, we have to belong somewhere. And the education system, children have to go to school. They have to be put in care. And sometimes you can see that there might not always be a choice for that to belong. But it's up to us as I think the education system is to always ensure that we can support the individuals to know that they have a place to participate and contribute meaningfully. And I think that's the biggest thing, because so many times I start to see when a child's actually learnt, I don't want to be here, I don't belong, they start to avoid. Even if an educator's open to wanting them to belong, children have learnt, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to pretend like I'm going to the toilet, I'm going to, I see a group of children together and I start walking away. And I think that's really important to consider. It's
funny because sometimes we can understand what's happening is sometimes we'll say they're not motivated or they don't, all this stuff, but really they don't feel like they belong.
That's right.
And that's what's being communicated to them. So it connects to our next question. And one of the things that we talk a lot about at Unleashed Learning is about creating a classroom of equal participation. And we have diverse learners. We have different races and genders and sexual orientations and languages and faiths. And so the question becomes, how do you recommend, or what are some ways you can suggest to us to ensure equal participation or to work for equal participation?
I think the first thing as an educator is never to just wait to just rely on what you see when you look at difference. You actually have to know that every student will have additional needs. I also think as an educator, you have to think about the rules that you have about what participation will be. In a classroom, there are learning outcomes that are common, but how are you setting the rules for how people will be engaged and participate? And I think what I've learned in my work with educators is oftentimes we set the rule that you're going to engage by telling me, answering my questions, a lot of verbal communication, and not all people participate that way. So being very aware and in tune that you have to build trust with some children and observe their non-verbal behaviours. They might not, it might be very confronting to be spoken to and told to respond. So, and I also talk to educators about adopting, a lot of the stuff is about listening and talking, but where are we giving children a role with their hands, something to contribute? Whether it's, you're working on a topic, how can they actually do something to be involved? What can they see to help them understand? And I think that's, those are two very key things. How does an educator observe diversity and recognise that it's there all the time? I think when I look at culture, we're always looking at how to not, think about the diversity based on just what we see in culture. It's actually knowing that we all have different values, different ways we want to belong and contribute, and being aware of that.
It's, it makes me think that I got to know who I am as an educator in that. And then I have to really think about who my students are in that. Right. And also what's the context of how are we participating in here. So my brain is going like this right now and nodding a lot while you're talking. The second part of that question really is about a sense of belonging. So we're talking about the diversity of our students, and and the gift that brings to our classrooms. So how do you recommend that we create a space that people feel like, I belong here?
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
I think that the first most paramount thing is how we celebrate. So, and how we celebrate for all people, like the, cultural celebrations, common celebrations are very important. Getting to learn about the individual child and what their strengths are and highlighting those, creating children as experts sometimes. I think a sense of belonging. I always think, when a child comes into a service, like an education setting, and they're not speaking English yet, how are you going to allow that child to be a gift to the other children by the language that they offer? And I love when educators and children start to be interested in the words that child knows. I also believe in bringing family involvement, because a lot of children who may not participate or feel a sense of belonging at school feel it in other places, whether it's their family, their community. And knowing, like I said, inclusion can sometimes be a place where you've chosen to belong, or it's sometimes somewhere you have to belong. And so some children, they might be great at sport, or they might belong to, their family groups. And that's really important to understand the child through different eyes, and then be able to celebrate their gifts, their strengths, and what they can contribute to that classroom.
One thing that strikes me for what you just said is looking at everyone's strengths, seeing what they bring as strengths. The diversity is a strength, and then the lenses that we watch and look at our students from. My brain's going crazy. I wish we now were together now. So my last question for you is this. What's a recommendation for us as educators that would really help us become inclusive educators or increase the ways of our inclusive practices? What would you recommend?
We've highlighted already the importance of knowing who we are as educators. I think that is, if you don't see your classroom as dynamic and changing, there might be a child that stands out at one point in time because it's a topic of interest, or it's something but it might change another time. You have to constantly reflect. And I suggest that educators get a team of support, because in every team there will be people that represent a different way of looking at something. It's funny that you talk about lenses, because that word respect, I learned what it actually means. And the word re means to do again, and spect is actually the word look. When we respect, we actually re-look at something. So we don't actually see it for the face value, but we keep re-looking to understand. And I think reflection comes into that. How do we look and bring what we come with our values, our attitudes, to the way that we, understand what we're seeing in front of us? I think for me, reflection. And I think continual knowledge, like I said, learning about the child, taking time to build trust and observing where they thrive. Working with families is huge. Can I share a success story?
Yeah, please.
I never forget, there was a child who had come into a service not yet speaking English, but she was learning and she was observing, but she knew in herself, I could tell that she wasn't confident yet to, practice English in this setting. And the educator was very, motivated and tried her best to give this child a sense of belonging. But it wasn't like, she could just feel this child was still very passive, and she would feel like she would need to almost not force her, but go against what she wanted. So we met with the family, and the family member said, wow, she's so talkative at home and she comes and practices English. So what we actually spoke to the family about is bringing some videos for the educator to see who this child might be in another setting. Lo and behold, what happened is this child actually enjoyed those videos being shared with the educator and watching them. So almost to say, here I am in a place and I'm willing now to watch. And she would tell her family member, please show them. And she was starting to, so that was the bridge that she needed to build that. But if the educator just thought this is the only child, this is their only identity here, we wouldn't have been able to see that this child had this other world, and whatever barrier they had, they needed to take that time to be ready to overcome it. So
you just remind me why I wanted to interview you so much. You know, the great work that's going out there. I really mean that. Like, isn't that the kind of world we all want to be at least I want to be living in. So before we end, we have a question for you. And our question for you is this. We want to know, what are you doing? What's a strategy that you use that really helps create equal participation and a sense of belonging for all your students? So some of the best conversations take place in our comment section in the blog. So jump over there, grab our free ebook, The Ultimate Classroom Setup Guide. That's going to help create a sense of belonging and equal participation, and that will help as well. So Nesreen, I cannot thank you enough. We had a short period of time, and I think I could interview for an hour. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. And I do encourage you to go on to Diversity
Absolutely.
Kids and find out about all the lovely work and programs that are out there for educators in supporting inclusion.
We'll put that link on there for
Excellent.
sure.
Thank
Thank you for the work you do, and we will see you in the next episode. We'll see you then.
Thank you.